further. We had a general question, so thank you from Heather Garrett. So I'll let you catch your breath, Sols, for a second, and it's to all, but I'll go first to Becky and Liz. Is there any sort of tools or guidance you think that are missing from the practitioners' toolbox to deliver this? Because we're going from this kind of strategic phase and the spatial mapping and what have you, and then bringing it down to actual action. So I'll start with you, Becky, if that's okay.
Okay. So something I'll sort of talk from a more bespoke place-based perspective. So one of the things that we've been really thinking about is what is an area statement to you, and we want it to be a very useful product. And so when we're looking at some of the sort of key issues that we've identified within the area, so as an example, when we're looking at woodland creation, we want to look at all the different options around woodland creation, so natural regeneration being an important aspect of that. So where we need more evidence around that and to add to our sort of practical toolkit, we so Rhondda County Taff Council have sort of been sort of really sort of looking into this, and we're working with University of South Wales to try and better understand that, sort of mapping how natural woodland regeneration can actually sort of create and really useful and more appropriate woodland. So that's one of the sort of things. But also, we're looking at Water Framework Directive data. So that is very national sort of data set, but we need it to do a little bit more. We need it to go up to the smaller watercourses, not just the main rivers, because I don't feel like it does actually give the real picture. So that will help us to tackle some of our really key problems. So I know that's a very specific and local example, but that's what we're trying to do, and we're sort of responding to the expertise and the understanding of our place. Oh, sorry, Sean, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Sean, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, guys. That's really useful overview. It'd be interesting to see also where those habitats intersect, what sort of decision trees will be making there. Liz, have you got any thoughts on that question?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's the next step, isn't it? Once you've got your ecosystem analysis, answering those questions around resilience and what's special and significant, and where the evidence and data gaps are, is to join it back up into a landscape scale. And I think the development in NRW of nature networks, so based on the English approach to nature recovery networks, that's being worked on at the moment, is going to be really important for that. So I've worked in living landscapes in the past in England, and they do just seem to capture decision maker, non-ecological minds much more, because I think they key into people's sense of place and pride in that place, and you're kind of giving it a bit of a branding or a name or something that, and it works for us, and hopefully it works for people as well. And if we can also highlight key species and charismatic species and try and do some flow through effects of conservation in those ways. So I think the toolbox is looking pretty good, I would say. I mean, it's been a rate of knots of development, hasn't it, the last few years, with all of this area statement development, post-Environment Act world that we're in now. And we can't forget that there are other tools in the other in related disciplines. So Planning Policy Wales 10 gives a lot of reference to ecosystem resilience. Perhaps more work on net biodiversity or biodiversity net benefit in Wales would be beneficial there as well. Again, already quite developed in England, where they've got the 10% gain required in development. So I think it is developing some tools a bit further, but I think we're yeah, and then training people up to use them and understand them. That's going to be a really key part of it.
There's a lot happening. Thank you, Liz. Sorrel, have you got any thoughts on that? What do you think's missing, perhaps with your Greater Gwent study?
Well, as I said, we're lacking habitat data and condition data on the data front. One of the things I also really struggled with was finding out what had been happening in the past in terms of conservation action. Things like older surveys that aren't freely available online. So I've done an awful lot of toing and froing to the NRW library, and it's a huge resource, but only about a quarter of it, I think, is digitised. So unless you're actually in Bangor, then it's really difficult to get hold of. Equally, I was getting a situation where I'd send our preliminary findings to a local recorder, and they'd say, "Oh no, that's not right. We did a project on that, X years ago," and then they'd send it to me, but that information wasn't there at point. And I know we've had some discussion about bars earlier in the week, but it's very hard to find out about previous conservation action and measure that impact currently.
You've been doing. We need to really, well, we certainly will be capturing all that. We've got a couple of minutes left. Len Wyatt asked a question about the South Central approach to the area statement, because there's a lot of economic decisions being taken, and the green recovery as well. How can the area statement influence those planning and economic investment decisions?
You're on mute, Becky.
Sorry. So when I was talking around the water environment, urbanization is a really key thing, and identifying a need to improve the way that we put our guidance together through to inform development processes, but then also sort of ensuring that we aren't contributing to additional physical modifications, and that any infrastructure being put in or sort of updated is actually bringing betterments in the environment. Like, that's one area which we're looking at. But we're also undertaking a series of assessments looking at river restoration, and some of these, we specifically said we want to look and target regeneration opportunities, so that whilst we may not necessarily have the funds or the means to undertake a lot of this work, they are there to inform and guide people through when they are sort of looking at development around the river, and we can sort of point people in the right direction for this. But overall, the area statement is there to inform local development processes, and what we're trying to do with our ecosystem summaries is very much sort of identify where we need to build resilience. So that will be a really, I hope it will be a really important reference document for local authority planning ecologists and inputting into that process. And that's where we say, what is an area statement? So it needs to be what those who are working on the ground need it to be. We want to make sure that it is an effective decision-making sort of support. So that's where we sort of say, get in touch, and we make sure that we are putting the right hooks in there for you.
And that's a good point. You do get in touch. It's a collective effort. Obviously, NRW are driving it, but they need your support. So please get in touch with them. That brings us to a close. I'd just like to thank Becky, Liz and Sorrel for their really interesting presentations. There's lots more information if you want to carry on with the WBP conference. I'm sure you do. It's all on the Hoover platform. You can look at future sessions, and there'll be a session starting at 10, Restoring Resilient Habitats session. And I think it's the first time a presenter's dad has asked a question, which I think is great. So well done, Liz's dad. So thank you all once again. In fact, very interesting. And thank you to all the people listening out there. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you at a future session at the Wales Biodiversity Partnership Conference. Okay. Diolch yn fawr.